Yo, what up? What it is? Welcome to Man Up Friday with me, Mike, your mentor. Hope you guys have had a good week. I know it's been a whirlwind for me, but I'm glad Friday night is here. I get to do this with you guys, and the weekend is coming, and just getting to do some stuff I need to get done. So. Show me some engagement on this post. If you're watching, I'd love if you hashtag live below, or if you're watching the replay, hashtag replay. Out of probably, there's a lot of things we talk about on these Man Up Fridays. This tonight is a really special and important one. So if you know another brother who could use this encouragement in their life, in their marriage, please do tag them in this, share it with them, let them know to come join us. So if you are new to this page and you don't know me, my name is Mike King, and this page is my attempt to make the world a better place by calling men back to the higher calling that they have on their lives as husbands, as fathers, as friends, and as leaders in our communities. And we're not going to change all the crazy stuff that's going on in the world until we're willing to look in the mirror and deal with ourselves first, our past hurts and wounds, and then accept the responsibilities that we've been given for ourselves and for the things that we have in life to steward. So I'm going to jump into tonight's content. Before I do, where does this come from? This comes from a workbook and video series I went through called The Quest for Authentic Manhood by Dr. Robert M. Lewis, and this really changed my life. I was at a point in my life where I didn't know if I wanted to continue to be married, didn't really know who I was, struggling with my identity and just what was next. Found myself living in Chicago with my wife, coming out of a bad situation I had put us in, and I needed some help. And I got introduced to this content, and light bulbs really started going off in my head, and things started making sense, going all the way back to my past as a kid, and being able to really connect the dots with what I had experienced and where I was at that point in my life, and realizing that if I wanted to start to make significant changes in my life, I needed to address those things in my past. And when I worked up the courage to do that in a loving and honoring way, I was able to become a better husband for my wife and a better father for my kids, and I think a better friend and person in my community and circle of influence. And that hasn't stopped. It's continued to go, and each day I'm learning new things and continuing to understand more and more what it really looks like to really be a man, what manhood and masculinity is supposed to look like. So I give honor to Robert Lewis because this is his content. So let's jump in for tonight and see what he has to say. All right, A Man and His Wife, part 4. If you're new, man, this is the time, I guess, to come in. This is a picture from our wedding day. Me and my wife just recently celebrated our 12th wedding anniversary, and I'll be real with you, there were times where I didn't think we would get here, especially in the beginning and after the aftermath of the lie that I told my wife coming out after we were married, and everything that we went through, especially in that first critical first year of marriage. I mean, oh crap! You talk about an uphill battle. I really put us in a hard place. Yeah, a really hard place. And God bless my wife for being the strong woman that she is, and for not giving up, and just for the wisdom and the guidance that we both needed to get here. So I definitely don't recommend you start your marriage off the way that I did. Not good. Wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. But tonight we're going to do a quick review and then jump in. So shared this last week. I just think it's kind of funny, a little light-hearted joke. This shows the difference between a man's brain and a female's brain. And you'll notice two things right away. In a female brain, the biggest part of that brain is chocolate, or the desire for chocolate, and for the men, it's the desire for sex. And then you can see the smallest part for men is the listening particle and the personal hygiene atom, and the commitment neuron. And then I guess for women it would be a bad hair days. But some funny things in there, that just make light of the differences between men and women. But that's okay. It's okay for us to be different, and to be given different attributes, and to think different, and to act different, because it's those differences that come together and make us whole, and those things complement one another and help us fulfill the callings that we both have on our lives as men and as women. So the past 3 weeks we've talked about the 3 models of marriage. The first model we had was the top-down traditional marriage. We find this in the book of Luke. And the position that the husband takes is one of king, right? And this is a reflection of most modern, or I wouldn't say most marriages in our parents and our grandparents' generations and the ones before them. And this leadership style is one of lord, right? One of dictator. What I say goes. And I got to see this firsthand. God bless my grandfather, but this is how he led in the house. He would always say, "My way or the highway," and I saw the effects that had on my grandma, and on their marriage. And the goal in mind is personal benefits. My grandpa changed a lot over the years, and he really was and could be a very unselfish and loving man. But God had to work on him and work through that. And there were times where he was very, very selfish, and that created a clear winner and a clear loser in my grandparents' marriage. I think today we've gotten away from that, and I'll talk about what it looks like today. And here's just a little just diagram of what that looks like, right? So God speaks to man, or the husband, and then the husband speaks to the wife, or this is the order, right? So first there's God, then there's the husband, then there's the wife underneath the husband. And that's the way that a lot of people thought marriage was supposed to be for a long time, for a lot of different reasons that we've hashed out before. And then this is probably typical of what is trying to be done in our generation and in our kids' generation, and that's the 50-50 identical marriage. And the Bible speaks to that in Galatians 3:28. And what happens is it positions the husband as a partner, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? The motive is good. But if you've ever been in any type of business partnership, it doesn't work that way. It can't always be 50-50. And in life it's not, and in marriage it's not going to be 50-50. There's some days where it might have to be 90-10. Lord knows it was like that in our marriage both ways at times. And this leadership style would be, I guess, be best described as leaderless. And the goal in mind of this type of marriage is equality. And once again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not the best thing. And the effects on marriage are, it's difficult to balance that equality, and when it's not which is most of the time, when you're trying to do it, it comes with hard falls, right? And someone really gets hurt. And this is what that would look like, right? So the man and the wife are both equal underneath God. And then there's a third type of marriage, and that's the side-by-side biblical marriage. And we see that reflected in Scripture in Ephesians 5, 23, and then chapters 25 and 31. Or actually, I'm sorry, verses 25 and 31, excuse me. And that positions the husband as a head of the household, and that's different than leader, right? Headship and leadership are two different things, and we've talked about that in the past, and we'll hash that or throw out. I'll talk about that again shortly, or I'll give you a little reminder here on the upcoming slide of what that looks like, because there's a lot of confusion. And then the leadership style is one of responsibility and sacrifice, because as men, that's what we're called to do as husbands, is to assume responsibility and then lead with sacrifice. And the goal in mind of that is oneness. And the effects on a marriage are a healthy marriage, one of happiness, and one of harmony. And here's what this is supposed to look like, where the husband and the wife both submit to God, and then the husband receives instruction from God, and then models that and sacrifices to the wife who submits to him. And we'll talk a little bit about submission and the misunderstanding behind that word as well. So we also discussed in the last 4 weeks the core issues in the biblical model of marriage, and that there was core rules that God gives both a husband and wife in marriage. And this is where a lot of the modern day misunderstanding comes. So the first one, like I said, we talk about is headship versus leadership. So headship is a title, right? It's a responsibility given, whereas leadership is a gifting that is placed in you. We all have different gifts, different levels of those gifts, and it's our job to cultivate those gifts. But you know, God can give a woman, and has given many women, the gift of leadership, right? He's given many men the gift of leadership, but it's not the same thing as headship. And this is what headship looks like. If you picture a tank brigade, and what a tank brigade looks like is you have one tank in front, and then you have another tank behind it, and then you have a third tank behind that, right? So they're in a single eye formation, and the tank commander will ride in the very first tank. And the responsibility of the first tank is, if they go into battle or they're ambushed, it's the first tank's responsibility to sacrifice themselves to draw the fire from the enemy, so that the second and third tank can come around and flank if it's offensive, or if they need to get away and retreat. So it's a sacrifice position, and the tank commander and the guys in the first tank, they know what they're getting into. They know what they signed up for. There's no surprise, right? They know they're going to have to lay down their life if it means so, for the good of the men in the second and third tank. And this is the picture of headship that God has called us into as men. The responsibility and the role is, we're supposed to accept that responsibility in our family and be willing to lay down our desires, our wants, our needs, for the good of our wife and the good of our family. That doesn't mean that we don't get our needs met, or that we shouldn't have desires and wants. But this is a calling that we have on our lives, right? And when we choose to accept it and we choose to walk in it, you know, our marriage is blessed and great things come out of it. And then second, you know, when we talk about submission, especially today, with a lot of women who unfortunately and rightfully so feel oppressed, because as men we've abused this position that we've been given in a multitude of ways, inside of the workspace, outside of the workspace. Just look at all the crazy stuff that comes out in the news almost every day about men abusing their positions, right? So, interesting enough, the Bible calls the woman the helper. And some people feel like that's a derogatory term, or a term that somehow equals less than, when actually it's not like that at all. And I think this goes to show the significance and the importance of the woman's role. So the word helper is only used 4 times in the Bible, right? The Bible's 66 books, written by over 40 different authors over a period of 2,000 plus years. Think about that. And out of all those words, helper is only used 4 times. And the 4 times that it's used to describe, or it's used in the Bible, it's used to it's used to describe four characters in the Bible. So the 3 main characters in the Bible: God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. Right? In the story of the Bible, nothing more significant, nothing more important, nothing more powerful. And then the 4th character that it uses, or that it describes, is the woman. I don't think that's coincidence. And I think that's extremely significant and extremely powerful. And we've gotten away from that, and that's been twisted and looked down upon and misunderstood, when clearly that needs to change. And it's just not the case. It's powerful, extremely powerful. And this is just a little diagram we had, right? And then last week we talked about this relationship that we have with our wives, and what God is calling us to do. And as husbands, He's calling us to a position of honor and praise, right? To honor our wives and to praise our wives. And in return, when we do that, our wives are more inclined to submit to our headship, right? And that doesn't mean that they become yes people. That doesn't mean that they just roll over and do whatever we tell them to. And that doesn't mean that they put up with whatever we do. Like, we can do anything we want, and that's just okay. And it's not it at all. The farthest thing from it. And this is how we help meet our mate's deepest needs. And we had 4 things we talked about, right? So men need companionship, they need admiration, they need support, and they need physical responsiveness. And a good wife will attend to those 4 areas. But what a wife needs companionship, security, significance, and emotional responsiveness. And when she gets these things, her deepest needs are met. And when we're both giving our spouses the things that they need, it creates this kind of flywheel effect, right? Where as men, we're more likely to put down or put aside our pride, and women are more likely to follow us, right? And to submit to our headship. And it's interesting because, any of these things, right? A wife could decide to do these things for a husband, and it's been my experience from what I've observed in dealing with that wives are generally the ones who try to initiate these things, but that's not how it's supposed to be. It's our job as men to initiate the things that our wives need first, and then they will respond in kind. Not to say that they can't ever initiate, but that's not the calling that they have. And right or wrong, fair or not, whatever you think, it's our responsibility as men to step up and make sure that we're providing our wife and our family with the things that they really need. So tonight's content, right? We're going to talk about a wife's core concerns, the 4 things that we just went over, but we're going to take a deeper dive on those. And this is how, as husbands, we speak women. And this is a very important language, right? Because as we saw on that second slide, that of the 2 brains that made fun of it, we are different and we think differently, and we have different needs. But we're called as men to study our wives and to study them deeply. And it's one thing to know something, it's another thing to do something with that knowledge, put that knowledge to work. So don't be a husband that knows these things but refuses to do that, right? Growing up, like I talked about my grandpa and his way or the highway. You know, my grandma, you know what would make her day more than anything is if she got her feet rubbed. Don't know why, can't explain it, but that's what she wanted, and that's what she would ask for. She'd ask my grandpa that all the time, and he would just refuse over and over and over and over again. I have no idea. You know, I think about my own family in my relationship with my daughter. My daughter, one of her deepest desires is to get her feet scratched. She just loves to have her feet scratched. Don't know why, but when I spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes scratching her feet, not only is she probably in heaven physically, I do not like to be scratched. She's having her emotional cup filled up, and she's happier, and she expresses that. She tells me she loves me, and she gives me a hug. So that's just an example, right? Like, I know that about my daughter. I know that makes her happy. And then even if I don't like scratching myself, I put myself in a position to provide her with what she needs and what speaks her language. So the first thing we talked about that companionship, right? And it's interesting, there was a survey done of counselors, and they said the number 1 complaint in marriage by wives is that their husbands won't talk to them. And I guess I can kind of relate to this. It's not that and this is the area that I've struggled in at times. It's not that I don't talk, and me and my wife have had to learn to how to do this dance, right? This engagement, right? Because when we first got married, my wife, she's awesome. She can get along with anybody. She can make friends with anybody, and she's really comfortable and big with, she's just way more comfortable than me with small talk and making small talk, and that kind of makes me feel a little awkward. I don't really know why, so I kind of avoid that. But you ask me a super deep question, or and I'm all over it. I'll talk all day, and that's how I like to engage. Let's just skip the small talk and get down to business, I guess, as they might say. So we had to figure out each other, and today it's not perfect at all, but my wife knows that to ask me those more engaging questions, and she knows the things that I like to talk about, and she'll steer the conversation in that way. And I gotta be reminded, just to take a minute or two to ask her, how was your day, and things like that, more on the surface, and make room for that small talk. So just keep that in mind, that was the biggest complaint in marriages, is that as husbands, we don't talk enough to our wives. The funny thing about it is, there wasn't this complaint when they were dating us. I'm positive my wife wouldn't say that. But somehow once we say those vows and then we wake up the next day, things start to change, and there's this natural tendency to drift apart, right, and to not make time. And not just this, but the other 3 things that we'll also talk about and go deeper, right? It's you gotta you got to be intentional about watering that grass in order to make it grow. And with life and with work and with eventually with family and stuff, it's very easy to take that stuff for granted. Lord knows that I do. So this is a good reminder for me as well. So now I just want to talk about three things. There's a must do. This is something that, without fail, you need to do if you want a healthy marriage. A can do, and then if you're really brave, something we call a should do. So the must do is regularly date your wife. Make time for you to get out with your wife and just the two of you, where you can do something that you enjoy, and you can talk and you can hang out. Maybe that's as simple as you guys, I don't know, going to Taco Bell for a little date night and getting something to eat, or going for a walk around the neighborhood. Whatever that needs to look like, we need to be making that time to regularly date our wives so we can contribute and fill their emotional cup. And then what you can do is develop a common hobby. What do you guys enjoy together? Me and my wife, we enjoy physical activity, sports. When we were first married and dating, my wife used to come and play basketball with me all the time. We go to the gym together and do boxing and boot camps and other things like that. So have that common ground, find that thing that you guys can both do together. And then if you're feeling really courageous, what you could do is plan a special yearly getaway with your wife, where you guys go away for a week, or maybe it's a long weekend, and it's just the two of you, and you catch up and you talk about life and talk to your wife about your goals for the family and your vision for the future, and what you guys want that to look like, and maybe maybe you want to plan a special trip in 5 years and where you want to go, and put together a plan to make that happen. Just go deeper and make time to sow into each other. So the second core concern that a woman has is security. And you'll notice that the type on this is a little smaller. That's because I got a lot to pack into this one, because this is probably one of the biggest things out of all of them for women, is the right or the need for security. And what is true of the workplace is not true of the marriage necessarily for a woman. And what I mean by that is, especially in today's day and age, women are more inclined to work, to have a job, to be taught from a young age to be dependent, and women tend to be more career driven than in the past. I have no idea what the percentages are, or how that skews, but it's true. In America, at least, a lot of the families, the majority of families, both parents work, and the woman is, our wife is giving her life to us, right? She's joining us. Two shall become one. And I think we forget how important that is, and we lose track of what that really means, because that day goes by so fast. And more than likely, the only time we ever say those vows is on that day and in that moment. And it's gone like that. And you're on to the next thing. And we don't do a good enough job of reflecting on that and really thinking about that. It's interesting in the Bible when it talks about marriage, it talks about being married and then taking a whole year off. Not working, just you and your mate. think about that for a minute. Like, what would your marriage look like? What would your relationship look like if it was possible to do that and to live that out, right? So a woman who's giving her life to us, right? She's joining us, wants to know that we can protect her, we can care for her, and we can provide for her financially. Should she choose not to work or not want to work or to stay home with the kids and help raise the kids. And a lot of men today, they lack the warrior face, and they wilt underneath this statement of being able to provide financially for your wife and for your family so that they can stay home. And I think a lot of that comes from men are still looking for a mother wife, right? They want someone to take care of them and to nurture them, and it scares them for a multitude of reasons. And I think it's it's part of the default mechanism in men. As humans, we want to take the path of least resistance, and as men, we have this higher calling on ourselves, and sometimes that higher calling, that responsibility is scary, right? And it's easy to just run from that or to try to find a way to avoid that. And one of the ways that we can avoid that is looking for a woman to provide for us. That doesn't mean they don't work. That doesn't mean they don't make a good income or make more money than a man. Sometimes that's just the way it works, and that can be a blessing. But is that necessarily a man's excuse not to contribute and not to provide for his family? I don't think so. So are you making her world safe for her to Man, I'm bad at typing tonight. Are you making her world safe for her to fulfill her life as a woman? And what does that look like? In the book, His Needs and Her Needs, they surveyed 20,000 couples and found that married women hated working if their money was a necessity. I think that something's blocking. I can't see what that says. If their money is an absolute necessity, that's what that says. Okay. And that's an interesting observation. It's going to be interesting to see what that looks like, maybe in 10 years. So, young men today, they're growing up and they're expecting women to take care of them because they haven't had these values instilled in them, and we as men have failed to show the younger generation what it looks like to be a man, and how to honor that position and that responsibility. And you need to remind your wife that you're committed to her, not just now, but you're committed to her for life. And then another way that you provide security is, to try to avoid getting to debt as much as possible. Just limits your options should things happen. And then what you want to do is you want to develop a long-term savings plan and have one that includes insurance, both health and life, and then get a well thought out will or trust to provide for her should something happen to you. I know that was a super big deal for our family, and my wife's own needs for us to have a will and trust. So we went and we got one, and it's all laid out. And then we have a book, and it spells out everything. It talks about all the accounts, the passwords, PIN numbers, all that stuff is all laid out. So should something happen to me, my wife has that, and she has that information, and she can do the best she can to pick up the pieces. So that's how we do that, right? That's how we meet that need for security, is to position, to position it, or how do I say that? To position things so that our wives don't have to worry about that should something happen to us. I think about my own family's life, and my dad not being there, and just seeing how hard my mom's had to work, and all the sacrifices she's had to make along the way. And it's just crazy. And I think of another person whose husband passed away, and they had nothing, and now they're struggling to move on and to support them and their family, and that's heartbreaking. So with a little bit of thought and a little bit of planning, we can prevent a lot of that as husbands and as men. And the greatest gift that you can give your wife and your children is the opportunity for her to be available to them growing up. Kids need their parents, kids need their mothers, and women are far better, or have a better inclination towards nurturing than men do, and I believe that's for a reason. And if you can provide a way for your kids and for your wife to be available for that growing up, I guess whatever that looks like for your family, then that's great. So the next one is significance. And some psychologists say that 90% of our consciousness is built, I think I spelled that wrong or right, is built on what others think of us. And our wives need to know what we think of them. And this goes back to even the first one of companionship, and talking to our wives. And this is another one that's a good reminder for me, and to hold myself accountable. And we need to take time to appreciate our wives and everything they sacrifice for us, the kids, and the family, and let that be known. Verbalize that, and put that in writing. And then the question is, what makes work with it? Oh, this was a note to myself. What did I mean by that? Oh, that's supposed to say what makes work worth it. So there was this survey done at this company, or across a bunch of companies, and they ask what makes your work worth it. And the number one thing for employees, they said that they worked hard for recognition, right? Like they wanted recognition. That was the number one thing they desired. And interestingly enough, management said money was the number one thing they thought the employees would want, and they ranked recognition as dead last. Women, I think, what does that say? Women want to be and need to be recognized for their contribution, and that's extremely important for us to do. Their motherhood and being a wife a lot of times is a thankless job. There's no trophy that goes on the wall, or on the shelf. I guess you could buy one. That might be a cool gift. There's no plaque that hangs on the wall. There's nothing that they get for being neighborhood taxi, running kids to and fro, for cooking, for cleaning, for all of these different things. All they have is us, and what we say or don't say, or what we do and we don't do to recognize their effort. So the must do for this one is, regularly tell your wife how much you value her and what she does and how important she is to you. What you can do is, surprise your wife and tell her why. So, take her out for a night on the town, or, buy her a massage package and send her to the spa for a day by herself, and and let her know why, that you just want to thank her for what she's done and what she's doing. And then what you could do, if you're feeling courageous, is lavish her with special gifts, shopping sprees or vacations, or I don't know, maybe your wife needs a new vehicle, and you can afford to do that. The costlier the better. That speaks volumes um, to our wives when we know them, and we pay attention to them and what they like, and then we show our appreciation through that language of gift giving. And then finally, there's emotional responsiveness, right? Our wives need to be able to share their hearts with us, and we need to be able to share our hearts with them, which can, as men, can be extremely hard. But it's not something that we need to be ashamed of or afraid of. It does take courage, and it's something that we have to work on every single day. And what this looks like is, when she has something important to tell us, we need to listen and not try to fix it. And that's probably goes against everything in your body, in every inch of your soul, because as men, we're natural fixers, but we don't need to fix it. We just need to listen. It's funny, the other day my wife told me that exact same thing. She said, I want to tell you something. I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to listen. And that was good for me. And we can ask follow-up questions like, how did that make you feel? Or, what did you think about that? And tell me more. Don't know why that security's in there. So the must do for this section is, regularly tell your wife I love you and give her a hug, right? Before she goes off to work in the morning, before she goes and gets the kids, before she runs to the store. That one of the things that I love about my relationship with my wife is that, we tell each other that we love each other all the time whenever we're going to leave the house, because we value that, and we know that one day, one of us may leave and never come back, and that's a reality. And I know for myself, I would never want my wife to leave and her not to know the last words out of my mouth were I love you. Not to say that we're perfect, because there are times where that doesn't happen. Yeah, she said she just punched me in the face before I leave. But we try to make that a habit, and that's a pretty good habit that we have. So the can do for this section is learn to say, so tell me how you're doing, right? And then just shut up and listen. Once again, don't try to fix anything, and let your wife share what's going on, and then you share what's going on with your life as well. And then the could do, if you're feeling extremely courageous, is on special occasions let your wife know why you love her, with spoken and written words, like writing her a poem, and be specific and romantic. I'm willing to bet large sums of money that this is, you may not have written poems, but you were this way when you were dating, right? You went out of your way to be specific and romantic with her. So that's it for tonight, and this wraps up our section about a man and his wife. And this is crazy. We're almost coming to the end here as we approach the last couple of months in the year. So next Friday, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start to talk about servant leadership and what that looks like. That's an important thing, especially today. It's becoming really corporate, servant leadership, but that's good too, because smart management is there to develop and assist their employees, and it just provides good culture. but what does that look like in your home, right? What does that look like in your everyday life? How do we play that out? How do we live that out? So we'll discuss. There's 25 ways in total. I don't know if we'll do half and half, but that's what we're digging into. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Like I said, if you know somebody, a man in your life, share this. It's a good reminder, this stuff, right? Of what we're called to as men. And I know that it's a good way for myself as well, to keep myself accountable, because I'm not good at some of those things. I'm not good at going out of my way and necessarily sharing openly a lot with my wife. I need to do a better job at that. And then the significant piece, right? Making her feel significant and vocalizing to her that she's doing a good job. So the challenge for you would be this week sometime is to, buy your wife some flowers and a card and surprise her, right? So I love you guys. If you need me, shoot me a DM, hit me up. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow for the Saturday shout out. Peace.